Hi, I'm Patrick Dunnican. At Gibbons, we believe that citizens need to be informed about the complex issues that affect their lives. That's why we're proud to support the programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation and their partners in public television.
Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Russell Berry Foundation, the Northward Center, Adler Aphasia Center, helping stroke and brain injury survivors recover their speech, the law firm of Gibbons PC, Wells Fargo, Verizon, and by ADP, a comprehensive provider of human resources technology and services. Promotional support provided by New Jersey Family Magazine and NJFamily.com. And by HipNewJersey.com. Live hard, work hard, play hard. You're from New Jersey, and so are we.
This is One-on-One. I'm an equal American just like you are.
The jobs of tomorrow are not the jobs of yesterday.
Look at this. You got this?
Here it is, man. Look at that.
Life without dance is boring.
When you first heard that they were doing Charlie Rose and Gayle King, didn't you go, what?
Do you enjoy talking politics?
No.
People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
Our culture, I don't think, has ever been tested the way it's being tested right now.
Such a good question. High five.
We're at the Commerce and Industry Association event. I was proud to moderate a discussion on leadership. Very dynamic discussion. One of our panelists, our distinguished panelist, Mike Maron, over at Holy Name, the leader there. It was very honest, Mike. I mean, it was all out there. Biggest takeaway for you on this leadership forum?
Well, to me, what was interesting is fascinating because it was unscripted. So the common threads that came up on their own between Ralph and Kathleen and myself were to me, was telling, right? That there are consistent attributes to good leadership that apply across the board. Doesn't matter what industry sector. So from public utilities to, education to healthcare, it's all the same.
By the way, it was Kathleen Waldron, who was the president of William Patterson University, and Ralph LaRosa, who is the president of PSEG. So it was a really dynamic discussion. One of the things that you said, I got to tell you, Mike and I have had lots of conversations on the air before about healthcare issues, but I want to delve into this leadership thing. You have said, and you said here, that a lot of your leadership style comes from the way you grew up, how you grew up, who you grew up around, and your values. Talk about that.
Yeah, so to me, it's a combination of hard work. In my household, if you had to, from the time you were 12 years old with the paper out, actually probably younger than that back then, on up through, I worked. I always worked. I had to sort of fend for myself and pay my way through college. And with that comes a drive and a willingness to want to do things. And you watch people, as I came up through the ranks, who were in leadership positions, you used to question, like, why? Like, so why do they behave that way? Why don't they? I'm a peon right now. Why don't they give me the time of day? And early on, I remember vowing to myself that if I were ever in that position, I would never, ever treat people that way, because I didn't like it when I was there treated that way. So don't do it, when you have the opportunity to pay it back. And I've kind of lived by that my whole life.
One of the things that also came up in this discussion that Mike was really candid about was the whole question of humility. Mike brought this up. We're talking about leadership styles, and not to be self-promotional at all, but in my book, Lessons in Leadership, which was part of the basis for our discussion today, I talk about that and a lot of my leadership failures heading up different organizations. And you talked about that. We talked about Donald Trump and his leadership style, and it was not a political discussion at all. It was stylistic. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I think, to me, always, lessons come in one of two veins. You can do positive things that you want people to emulate, or people can do negative things that you don't want to repeat. And unfortunately, we're in a day and age where there's more negatives, right? And so in this environment, someone can have conviction, they can have passion, they can be willing to go against the grain. Those are all great leadership attributes, right? I believe in something, I'm going to be articulate about it, I'm going to be passionate and drive for it. The flip side of that is if you make yourself the center of that universe and you lose humility and you come across as arrogant and egotistical and have this superiority complex, you lose your audience. And so the good side of what you're trying to achieve gets lost, and it's too easily overshadowed by those negatives. It's incumbent on every leader, when they wake up in the morning, when they're looking in themselves in the mirror, to say, how am I going to conduct myself today, and what could I do better today that I didn't do yesterday? And if you're not challenging yourself and asking yourself those questions, then you're just missing the opportunity of today to do something better than you did yesterday.
But talk about that a little bit more. And I don't mean to be overly analytical or philosophical or engage in psychological mumbo jumbo here. But in all candor, you're talking about being very self-reflective and self-analytical. Is that the job of a leader, particularly the President of the United States, major corporation, to be that self-reflective?
Absolutely. Don't
you have to keep moving forward, Mike?
Yes, yeah, but in moving forward, it's not like you get out in a public forum and you're doing a mass confession every day. You're challenging yourself privately, right? And so you realize, especially someone like the President of the United States, I got a public aura I got to maintain. Right?
I got to show confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a world stage that I'm playing on, and there's a lot of it is theater, and I am playing to perception. But behind it all, right, there's a great quote that one of the nuns taught me years ago. It says, power corrupts, total power corrupts totally. Right? So it's so easy to get sucked in by those gravitational forces to say, I am powerful, I am influential, I end up becoming the center of my universe, however I'm going to define.
That can happen to any leader, in a corporation, hospital, nonprofit, anything.
Doesn't matter. I could be a leader of a 50-person company or a 20,000-person company. I can be a community leader. It doesn't. That power corrupts. And if you can't look yourself in the mirror every day and say, today it's not going to corrupt me. Today I will hold it in abeyance and I will conduct myself in a way knowing that I have this influence, but knowing that I am only one of many in this chain, not the lead of the chain, not the center of the chain. That's the effective leader.
What keeps you humble?
That, realizing that there are so many other people who are so better than you, right? That you're part of a big connected world. And no matter where you go, I learned this in sports, right? You compete in sports, you think you want to be the best, you work hard. There is always will be someone who's a little faster, a little stronger, and a little better than you. Happens all the time, right? Every sport, you never dominate forever. So take those lessons and apply it into life and leadership. You have to be humbled by it, right? You got to realize there's always someone out there who's better than you.
Final question. Ever-changing world around us. You mentioned Dr. Spencer Johnson's Who Moved My Cheese. Mike told a great story about the book Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson, all about change and the need to adapt to change. In the ever-changing healthcare environment, how important is it that leaders are constantly aware of change, adapting to change, and in fact, embracing change?
Critical. Healthcare it's in a revolutionary state right now, and given everything else that's coming down the road, it's going to be even more disruptive, more of a revolution going on. If you can't cope with change, if you can't get comfortable with that and the pace of change, then as a leader, you're going to be grossly ineffective, and people are going to suffer as a result. So you have to be willing to disrupt comfort zones. You have to be willing to go out there and say, we're going to break these old paradigms. I'm not going to be a lemming. I'm not going to follow public trends. I'm going to apply critical thinking and logic, and I'm going to challenge. And then where I think that challenge is right, conviction, I'm going to follow it.
Makes people uncomfortable. Finally, Mike, it makes people real uncomfortable around you when you do that.
It does. It does. But that's where you as a leader have to be able to find that ability to do that and yet make them still feel comfortable, willing to follow you and say, I can do this.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Steve. It's great being here.
To see more one-on-one with Steve Adubato programs, visit us online at steveadubato.org. If you would like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato PhD and follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato.
We're speaking with Dr. Nancy Chiaravalloti of Kessler Foundation, also research professor, Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. Doctor, let me ask you this. The cognitive issues, the memory issues as it relates to MS, talk about them.
Cognitive problems are very common in people who have multiple sclerosis. What I mean when I use the term cognitive problems is your ability to think clearly, to process information quickly, and to remember things. And if you think about your everyday life, we use our cognition constantly. We're always trying to remember new names, learn new faces. We're trying to follow along in conversations, drive, pay attention to different things at the same time. Those are all things that entail cognition, and they can be very difficult for someone who has multiple sclerosis.
So someone, it does not, let's just say this, someone doesn't have MS. They're living a certain kind of life, and all of a sudden they're diagnosed. Are there certain memory cognition issues that usually happen pretty quickly, and what are they?
MS is a progressive illness, so what happens is the disease progresses over time and it gets worse and worse. So as the disease progresses, these cognitive problems tend to begin to appear and then get worse as time goes on. So they won't get diagnosed on Tuesday and have a memory problem on Friday. What will happen is they'll get diagnosed on Tuesday and they may start to see that they're having some trouble paying attention. So as an example, when they're watching a movie, they may have trouble catching on to all the little details and following along in the plot. And then that may get worse as time goes on as the disease progresses. And then they may begin to have trouble remembering things. So when they meet a colleague and they see a new face and attach a name to that face, they may have trouble remembering that name over time.
So folks listening to you right now, doctor, might say, well, that sounds like a form of Alzheimer's, but it's not?
It's not. The pathology in the brain is different. So what
Define pathology.
Pathology is the disease process that's actually happening at the level of the brain is very different. What that means is that the symptoms and the way the symptoms appear, the order in which they appear, the speed in which they appear, are different. So someone with MS, if you think about MS is diagnosed very young. So you're talking about someone who's somewhere between the ages of 30 and 55 being diagnosed with MS. Think of what we're doing between 30 and 55. We're working, we're in the prime of our lives, we're raising children, we have very complicated schedules, and to then have a neurological illness that you know is progressive thrown upon you and have to deal with that, that's very, very difficult. So as your cognition gets worse, you feel that in your everyday life because you're demanding a lot out of yourself. Now, what's different in a disease like Alzheimer's disease, the population tends to be older and the demands of their life are somewhat different. So they may not be working anymore. If they are working, they tend to have a little bit of a lighter schedule, a little bit more flexibility than someone who's 30 years old and raising their children and juggling a work schedule.
So I want to talk about treatment in just a second, but I'm curious because one of the things we're doing tonight here at Kessler Foundation, there's a forum, an MS research forum. We're talking to a whole range of people, and one of the people we're talking to, a registered nurse by profession, approximately a little less than 40 years ago was diagnosed with MS, participating in MS research here at Kessler Foundation. How challenging is it to get people to participate in these studies, which are absolutely critical to finding what you need to find out, right?
Absolutely. Without the patients volunteering to participate in our research, we couldn't do our research. We couldn't develop the treatments that we're developing, and we couldn't show the data that indicates that these treatments are actually working and they're actually helping people. So people volunteering to participate is absolutely crucial. We advertise all the time. We have advertisements on our website, at support groups. We advertise through physicians. It can be difficult to get people to volunteer just because they don't know exactly what's involved. But I would encourage people to give us a call and to talk to a research assistant, one of our staff members, who can tell them exactly what's involved so they know. We don't use any medications unless they want to do that type of research. We don't inject anything. It's really the work that we do is really trying new treatments and testing the effects, and those treatments are not treatments that are invasive in any way, shape, or form.
You know, it's interesting. I've actually worked with Dr. Chiaravalloti and some of our colleagues in some leadership and communication seminars, and one of the things that I've been challenged by, and I want you to talk about this, are the communication issues, frankly. And sometimes I wonder how hard it is to communicate, frankly, very complicated, clinical, technical issues to those of us who are not trained in the way you are. Am I making too much of that?
No, what you're saying makes perfect sense. It's a very complicated picture, but it's very understandable to someone who puts the effort in to try to understand it. So thinking about, I want you think about your everyday life and what goes into your everyday life. So you wake up in the morning and you have to get dressed, and you have to get dressed in a certain sequence in order to successfully get dressed. You're grabbing your keys, you're running out the door, you might have kids that you need to drop off at school. That's a lot of what we call executive functioning. So it's sequencing your actions. It's deciding what you do at what step. And that takes a tremendous amount of cognitive abilities. It takes processing speed. It takes organization. It takes memory. So where do you have to drop Jack off versus Sue? And what time does Jack have to be there? What time does Sue have to be there? And then what time is your meeting? Where do you have to go next?
And someone with MS, for those of us who take that for granted right now, someone with MS,
it's very, very difficult for them to keep track of all that, to remember any new information, any changes, which, as you know, happen all the time, and then to carry everything out successfully. It's very, very challenging. However, it can be done, and we're developing treatments to try to help them to do these things better.
Finally, Doctor, you sound hopeful about the research as well as the treatments.
I am hopeful. I'm hopeful because we're making some real progress. We are developing new treatments, and we have patients who are volunteering to help us out and learn more about these treatments and show what is working and what's not working. And then we're also doing research where we're actually looking at how the brain is changing, and that's showing us why these things are working. The reason that's important is because if we know why something's working, then we can refine it, we can make it better, and we can develop more treatments that do the same thing.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
To see more one-on-one with Steve Adubato programs, visit us online at steveadubato.org. If you would like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato PhD, and follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato.
Steve Adubato here at Montclair State University. This is the 2017 Annual Scholarship Dinner. I'm a graduate of this fine institution, but only one graduate standing next to me is the honoree tonight, one of our honorees. She is Annette Catino, President and CEO, QualCare Alliance Network, Inc. You are one of the honorees tonight. How does that feel?
It feels great. It feels great to come home and for my alma mater to recognize my achievements.
And the other part of this night, we've been talking to people all night, this event raises a lot of money for scholarships for young people who otherwise would not have a chance to go to college. Talk about that part.
Well, that's very important to me because when I went to college, I had to work my way through college. There weren't a lot of scholarships available. And so I worked full time and came to college and did what I had to do. But to make it a little easier for young people today so that they don't come out of college with mountains of debt just makes their dreams and their aspirations more of a reality for them.
Talk about that a little bit, Annette. To disclose, Annette is a member of the board of trustees of the Caucus Educational Corporation, our production company. We've known each other a long time, and as a great supporter of public broadcasting. But we actually have talked about leadership. We've talked about the challenges people face for a long time. Did you know, quote, back in the day, at Montclair State, that you were going to be a leader in business and philanthropy and do the things you're doing?
Well, my mother said I was a colicky baby and that she always thought I was going to be the president of something.
Something.
Something. She didn't know what, but something. But no, I mean, it was the grounding that I got here at Montclair State that really opened up my eyes to the world of healthcare. I didn't know anything about healthcare as an industry. I had a professor who taught me about healthcare economics.
You always talk about that professor.
Oh, she's the love of my life because I wouldn't be here tonight, but for one professor who really opened my eyes to this field that was growing, that was a huge part of our gross domestic product, that was going to be taking care of people for lifetimes. And she said, your business acumen can be used to help people. And that was what attracted me to healthcare.
Isn't it so interesting? People often say, I want to be an entrepreneur. And by the way, we've interviewed people who are great entrepreneurs. Our friend Gary Vee has made a ton of money. He's great. He said, college is overrated. You don't need it. But for some people, like Annette Catino, there was a professor you met who said some things to you, impacted your life, and you may not be here today and be the success you are in the Business Hall of Fame, and so many other great, Junior Achievement has honored you, so many others, if it were not for that experience.
Absolutely. I was on a path to become an accountant. I was going to be a CPA. That's where I thought I was going to land. And I had this one course And she said, you should go to graduate school if you're interested. She helped me get a summer internship at Mountainside Hospital in Montclair, New Jersey. I went into the hospital and just fell in love with working with doctors, working with nurses, working with the community to try to help people. And it was something that I knew I was destined to be.
Every time I get a chance to speak to Annette, given everything going on in the world of healthcare, I have to ask you, where do you think we are today, and more importantly, do you have any idea where we may be going tomorrow?
Well, I think we all have a hint of where we're going tomorrow, and that is we're trying to preserve some of the important components of insurance reform that were part of the ACA as we move forward. But the biggest challenge we have in America is we have a lot of people who don't have health insurance and haven't bought it even under the ACA, and we also have a cost problem in that we are approaching 20% of our dollar being spent on healthcare, of every dollar in America. It's not sustainable. The aging of the baby boomers, which you and I are part of, is just going to make that situation worse. So we have to come up with a solution that balances both the cost and the quality of healthcare to make it affordable for every American.
And speaking of every American, what advice would you have for healthcare consumers out there today who are saying they have one eye on Washington, one eye on Trenton, and one eye on their insurance company or whomever, their providers, saying, I don't know what's happened. What advice do you have for them?
Well, my first advice is always take care of yourself. You have to be empowered to take care of your body and your health and your family's health. And you can't take care of your family if you're not well. So wellness is an important component of it. That being said, we're going to know about this as it's happening. It's going to be live from Washington, your new health care plan. And we're going to have to deal with it as Americans, as we always do. We're going to have to do our research. We're going to have to see what's best for our family. And I'm hoping that the new administration gives us more choices so that we can pick out what works for our family and our family's needs.
All right, a couple questions and I'll let you go because there's so many people who are here for Annette and the other terrific honorees at Montclair State University. We're at the 2017 annual scholarship dinner. They're raising a lot of money for students who otherwise would have a very hard time going to college. Leadership. Number one lesson, I've asked you this before, I'm going to ask you again, share with folks. Number one lesson you learned about leadership is?
You have to be passionate about what you do. If you're not passionate and it's just a job, you can't be a great leader. Great leadership is part of your being. It's part of what you do every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And if you're not passionate about what you do, you can't be a great leader.
Do you believe there's any difference between the way women lead and men lead? I know it's not across the board. Well, what are you laughing at, Annette? We've had this discussion a lot. You work in a business. It's not, well, you've worked in a profession that is disproportionately led by men. You've dealt and negotiated, compromised, not compromised, dealt with conflict resolution. Do you think there's any significant differences, men leading, women leading?
Absolutely. I think the only reason I was successful was because I was a woman. I think a man in my job would have had a harder time with a predominantly male board in a field that's dominated by men because they have egos.
What?
And I don't have an ego.
But wait a minute.
I don't.
You have a lot of confidence.
I have a lot of confidence, and some people tell me that I might be intimidating. But that being said, I look for compromise. I'm always looking for a way to make a win-win for everybody. And if you can find a win-win, you can work with anybody.
And finally, you think that is a bit related to gender?
I do think it's related to gender. I think that the mothering instinct that comes out in your role and the ability to try to get people to see two sides makes a difference. And I think women do it particularly well.
Two things. Thank you and congratulations, my friend Annette Catino.
Thank you for being here and being a great supporter of Montclair State. We appreciate it.
My honor. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Steve Adubato here at the annual Montclair State University Scholarship Dinner. We're here with Dennis Bone, who knows all about entrepreneurism and is leading the center here. By the way, tell everyone the official name of the center that takes young people and turns them into entrepreneurs.
It's the Feliciano Center for Entrepreneurship. Completely experiential thing for all of our students.
And how does it change their lives and teach them about being entrepreneurs of tomorrow?
because they live it. This is not a classroom thing. They go out, we give them seed capital, they go out to find their customers, they do everything they have to do, and then they come back and pitch for a $10,000 prize. It's completely authentic, nothing, no corners cut.
And a night like this is so important, Dennis, because?
Because these students come here, they get an incredible education, we prepare them to go out and succeed in the world, but many of them don't have the means to go to college, so scholarships are essential.
And finally, what would you say to those who say, I just want to be an entrepreneur, I don't need college, you say?
I'd say about more startups fail than succeed. So you really should get the edge and try to understand exactly how you differentiate yourself, what you need to know to succeed, and they can get that here.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Steve.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Russell Berry Foundation, the Northward Center, Adler Aphasia Center, the law firm of Gibbons PC, Wells Fargo, Verizon, and by ADP, transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
How do you create change? By cultivating hope. And we see that every day. In the eyes of our preschoolers, in the souls of the seniors in our Adult Day program, in the minds of the students at Robert Treat Academy, a national Blue Ribbon School of Excellence, in the passion of children in our Youth Leadership Development Program, in our commitment to connections at the Center for Autism, and in the heart of our community, the Northward Center, creating opportunities for equity, education, and growth.